Good evening and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Dr. June Leach. I'm a member of KMA Research Committee and I'll be the MC for tonight. So let's just give about 2 more minutes for more people to log in and we'll be starting in a few minutes. Okay, so it's now just a minute to 7. It's 7:05 right now, actually. I hope you can all hear me. Again, good evening to all of you. Welcome to our research and publishing webinar series. The theme for today's webinar is scientific peer review, and we'll be hosting Dr. Anthony Etiang and Dr. Anthony Ajayi, who I'll be introducing shortly. But first, I want to acknowledge the presence of all our KMA National Executive and National Governing Council members joining us this evening. And I will hand over to the KMA President, Dr. Simon Kigondu, to make some welcoming remarks. Dr. Kigondu, over to you.
Thank you very much. Not to belabor the point, we want to welcome all to these webinars hosted by the KMA Research Committee together with the East African Medical Journal, the oldest medical journal hosted by KMA. And we hope to learn 1 or 2 things. And without much further ado, I'll take it back to Leach.
Okay, thank you, Doctor. So for some reason, I'm unable to post in the chat box. So I'd like to alert everyone to type in their Q&As in the Q&A box, and we'll address them during the Q&A panel discussion at the end. For now, let me welcome today's webinar series, Dr. Anthony Etiang from KEMRI, Wellcome Trust Research Program, and Dr. Anthony Ajayi from APHRC. So we'll start with Dr. Anthony Ajayi. Can give you a little bit of information about him and his bio. He's an associate research scientist at the African Population and Health Research Center. He has over 8 years of experience in implementing multi-country and regional research projects in adolescent sexual and reproductive health, maternal health, and HIV, including technical support to the network of African Parliamentary Committees of Health. He was a research fellow and lecturer at the Department of Sociology, University of Fort Hare. I hope that's how Hare is pronounced, South Africa. Currently at APHRC, he serves as a principal investigator on the challenging on the Challenging the Politics of Social Exclusion project. Once again, I request everyone to keep their microphones on mute as the presentation is ongoing, and please use the Q&A box to type out questions to the speaker. Karibu, Dr. Ajay. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Lish, for the introduction. It's my pleasure again to be here today. Last year, I had the opportunity to be part of the presentation on research design, and I'm glad to be back again. And thank you for granting me the opportunity to share. So today I'm going to be speaking about preparing manuscripts for publication. So we all have our manuscript ready after this presentation, and we are ready to then click submit. That's the goal of today, and that's the main objective of my presentation. So the outline for my presentation goes as follows. Why publish, and what to publish, where to publish, finding the right journal, submitting your articles, and the peer review process, as well as tips to improve your acceptance rates. So why do we publish? You know, as researchers, we make huge contribution to advancing this essential knowledge. And if we store that knowledge on our computers, then we are not doing our world, our society, a world of good. So it's important. In fact, it's only when you publish a paper that then you can say you've contributed to knowledge, because that makes it easier for other researchers to find your articles and then be able to reuse it and learn from it, as well as also, it also helps policymakers to also, you know, synthesize your evidence and use it to inform policy. So your contributions, no matter how little you might think it is today, it might be an important contributions that will eventually save lives. Some of the mRNA vaccines that we see now today, the work began, you know, as far back as 80s, and then they probably do not see immediate benefit of it. So our publications might be important contributions that will eventually save lives, improve the way we live, as well as impact society. Also, we owe the participants we collected data from a duty, a moral duty to share our findings. You know, oftentimes we as researchers, we don't share our findings even down to the grassroots, but we are seeing new paradigm shifts in that direction, whereby we not only publish, but we also share our findings and disseminate to policymakers, as well as to the people we collected data from, so that they can begin to use the findings to make some meaningful changes in their community. That said, publications also help us, you know, get jobs, promotion. It also generally helps us to advance our career. They begin to now recognize you as the authority, you know, in a particular field. So that brings me to what do we publish, or what to publish? You know, of course, we publish full articles that are from original data. However, you can also publish a letter to the editor or a rapid and short communication. These might just be, maybe there's a new, you know, during the time of COVID, there are a lot of opinion pieces around how to address the pandemic, some of the things we need to consider, some of the inequalities in our societies that might worsen outcome for a particular group of people. So there might be important or significant advances that, you know, you quickly notice that you want to contribute to. I know EAMJ Global Health is one example of a journal that publishes a lot of opinion pieces or letters or short communications. And if you've been following the debates around decolonizing global health, you know, that's one journal you will see a lot of articles published that are just based on opinions of authors. Also, we publish review papers. And the review papers are, you know, could be systematic review, it could be with meta-analysis, it could also be scoping review, or even narrative review. Those are allowed. So maybe there has been a lot of research in a particular area, and the evidence is, you know, in one or two directions. So you want to synthesize to be able to have a global picture of what evidence exists on a particular issue, you might decide to conduct a review. And in that, your thesis, you can also, publish the literature review section of your thesis. So it's going to be a review paper, and it's also important. But besides that, we also publish what I call research elements, which include your data. In fact, these days now, many journals insist on you publishing your data, as well as your methods. You can do methodological papers, you can do briefs, citable articles, videos, software, all these things are publishable. And that brings us to the elephant in the room. Where do you publish? We know that there are lots of predatory journals these days, people that are just in need for money. They tell you to submit your paper to them and they will publish it in 2 days, that the fee is just around $100, So my advice is you avoid predatory journals at all costs, because it will not count for your promotion, it will not count for you anywhere. So it's important to avoid predatory journals. But we are going to speak to how to identify good places to publish your work. But more importantly, one important place to publish is peer-reviewed journals, and it exemplifies the best practices in research publication. So at all costs, you want to publish your papers, because peer review is really, really important. Peer reviewers are gatekeepers, and it's peer because they are also authors like you all over the world that would then serve as gatekeepers to assess your methodology, to provide feedback for your work, and then to assess your methodology as well as findings and your conclusions to ensure that all those things are in order. So that said, how do you know if a journal is peer reviewed? That is, what do you expect to see in a peer review article that you might not see in other sources of information or in those papers in predatory journals? Often peer review journals, you will see the name of the journal on the article. You can tell whether this is a reputable publisher. And how do you assess whether this is a reputable publisher? You would look at the name of editors. Are they affiliated with an institution that's reputable and well known? Who are the editors? Who are the senior editors? Is it someone that studied say, for example, someone that studied medicine, but is now an editor for an engineering journal? That should be an important red flag. So the discipline should also match the focus of the journal, and the editors should be well known in the field. There is a common format for article, and I'm going to show you the format later. So once you see articles with, funny formats, you probably know that this is not from a reputable publisher or journal. Also, they always specify the authors as well as their affiliations. It's always have an abstract, citations and references, and there is always a disclosure of completing interest in those articles. So, peer-reviewed journals are into two major categories. There is a subscription journals as well as open access journals. Over the past 10 years, there's a lot of push towards, making science open and free. And so we see lots of publications. The open access journals have grown, both in terms of quantity and in terms of the number of papers they publish over the years. But there's also the traditional model of subscription journals. You usually request fees for you to be able to access articles in those journals. They might charge up to $30 or even $50 for you to view an article. Institutions also subscribe to these subscription journals, such that their students and everyone affiliated with the institutions can access articles for free. Usually, there's always restriction on sharing of articles in subscription journals. And even if you as the author may not be able to share your work, unlike open access journals where you're able to make your works available on your social media, it's free, it's permanently free and accessible, and it's also friendly for sharing and reuse. But there are also types of open access journals. So some journals, they do full open access journals. That is, all papers they publish are fully open for everyone to read. But there are also hybrid journals whereby they combine both subscription as well as open access. So if there's a subscription, if you want to publish in a subscription journal, maybe it's one of the top journals in your field, you can check with them to find out whether you can pay to make your articles open access. So meaning they publish both articles that they request fee for people to access, and the ones you bear this fee as the author, you just basically pay them, and then others can read your work. There's also delayed open access, meaning there may be an embargo period of 1 year, 2 years before the article becomes fully open. And the last category of open access journals are the no-fee open access publications. I know quite a few of them, and they are usually, published by professional organizations. Up the top of my head, I'm thinking about 3 journals now. I think there's Global Health and Practice that is fully free. I know there's a demographic journal that is also fully free, Demographic Research. And I know there are a number of free journals that are open access, but they don't charge the authors any fee. I think one thing that must be said is that for many of the open access journals, they charge a publication fee, which is called article processing fees. And for some of the top journals, I mean, there's also a debate around how expensive those fees are, and it's an important debate that's ongoing. But more importantly, for us in Africa, we can benefit from waiver requests. So do not allow the fees to deter you from publishing. Instead, you can check with the journal whether they can allow you to request for waiver. That said, how do you then identify the right journals to publish? Finding the right journals for your article can be key to reaching your target audience. And as I said previously, you do not want to publish your journals in pediatric journals, but more importantly, you don't also want to publish your journals where your target audience do not read, do not go to. So what you want to do is you want to identify where do people or your professors publish their work. I think it's important because that's where experts in your field will go to read and read the latest advances in research. So taking into consideration the type of article you would like to publish, whether it's full length, whether it's a letter, whether it's review, whether it's a research, you must take that into consideration because that's really, really important. And then you begin the process by just looking at the references of articles you consulted in drafting your articles, and then begin to see where they publish those papers you've been reading that inform your articles. And I think that's a good place to start. Also, you want to then, once you get to those journals, you also want to read the aims and scope of the journal. You want to check who are the editors of these journals. What's their credential? Are they known in the field? What have they done? What institutions are they from? You also want to check if the journal is based on invitation only. Some journals only publish papers that are based on invitation. So again, you don't want to waste too much energy sending papers to those ones. Also, you want to check the performance of the journal, whether they do peer review or not, whether they publish open access or not. You want to then you want to look at the length, because this is really important. I remember the first paper I did. I wrote the paper, it's about 5,000 words, but I wanted to now submit to BMJ Sexual and Reproductive Health. And to my surprise, they only allowed 3,000 is the maximum length. So I had to cut 2,000 words, and that's always not easy. So it's important to check the length of words they permit. And always bear in mind that you can submit only one journal at a time. So you can't submit one paper to 10 different journals. That's a waste of the journal's time. So you need to try as much as possible to avoid that. But more importantly, you also need to, when you read the about section of the journal, you need to check if the journal is indexed in, say, Medline, Scopus, PubMed, Social Science Citation Index. It's important that the journals are indexed because it makes it easier for people to find your work. You put in a lot of effort in drafting an articles, going through series of reviews. So you don't want to publish it in a place that no one will read it. So it's important that you find the best place for your paper, and it's important that where you're publishing your paper, make sure that it's at least indexed in Scopus. Now, there are a lot of tools you can consult. Aside from consulting your abstract, you can also consult a tool developed by Elsevier called journalfinder.elsevier.com. There is also Jane Semantic. So if you Google Jane Semantic on your computer, you can just put the title of your article or the abstract, and then it can suggest journals for you where you can publish your work. I know other journals like, other publishers like Taylor and Francis also have these tools to help you, find journals. And the good thing about this tool is that it can help, it can give you metrics to assess where to publish. It can give you metrics like the acceptance rate, time to first decision, and all that, because I know many of us also need those papers for promotion, to get jobs. So you don't want to put your papers for journals that are notorious for keeping papers for 2-3 years before they publish. So you want, but then there also needs to be a balance between quality as well as speed. So immediately you also look at the impact factors of the journal. Impact factor is a metric that measures the accessibility of the paper in a way, because if the impact factor is high, it means other authors are using articles from the journal to inform their work. So in deciding a journal, you are balancing the decision between speed, the reach, as well as the impact. The speed talks about the review speed as well as online publication time. I have a paper accepted since February this year with one journal. I'm not going to mention the name of the journal, and it's not published up until today. But there are those journals that if they accept your paper today, within 2 weeks, they publish it. So speed in terms of decision, speed in terms of time to publication from acceptance, all those things are important consideration that you might want to pay attention to. But more important, but beyond speed, you also want to pay attention to geographical location of as well as the usage of journal. How many people are reading the journals? Is it from only a particular region of the world? Again, you want journals that have a wider reach such that your work can, be used all over the world. And then the impact. Impact is usually measured based on citations, as I mentioned previously. And that's also what's used to compute the journal impact factors. For those in medical sciences, the impact factors are pretty huge. In medical journals, New England Journal of Medicine, for example, or the Lancet itself, or the BMJ, British Medical Journal. Those are highly prestigious journals. But yeah, you might consider those if you are sure of your work. But there are also, medium range impact factor, they say from 10 to like 5. That you can also still publish your work. And even from 4 to 1, they are still pretty decent journals. So now that you've, evaluated the journals and you have, settled on a particular journal, you then want to visit the journal's website. You want to read about information for authors and understand the requirements. Usually all journals, have a section where they put the information for authors that contains all the requirements for their journal, including citation, references time, how you format your tables, how you format your figures, everything, the number of words to include in your abstracts. Some permits up to 500, some they only have 150 words. So there are a lot of limitations, even the style of the abstracts. Some is a block form, some you break it down into into background, methods, results, as well as conclusion. So again, all those important things needs to be tidied up. And it's also important because your paper can be rejected if you don't follow simple rules. Once you've done all that and you formatted your articles, what you then want to do is to draft a captivating cover letter. And usually in your cover letter is, you want to also, share some of the top line findings of your work and the gap you think your study is filling, and the importance and value of your research, such that they can consider our manuscripts. And then you click on submit. Now, typically, an article structure is like this, what you can see on my screen. You know, you have the title, the abstract, the keywords, introduction, methods, results, discussion, conclusion, as well as acknowledgements and references, as well as supplementary file and data if you have some. And we are not going into how to prepare those sections, but I know there have been a series of webinars like this that go into how you structure your introduction as well as methods. So, but typically this is the structure of an article. Now, roughly 35% of all submitted manuscripts are rejected before peer review. So it's important that you consider the following. Do your findings advance understanding in a specific research field? Is your work of interest to the journal's audience? Is your manuscript structured properly? Are your conclusions justified by your results? Are your references accessible enough? And did they follow the format? Did you format your figures and tables properly? Did you correct all grammars and spelling mistakes? These are important checklists before you even, when you think you are ready to submit, just ask yourself all these questions, because this might really be important in getting acceptance or rejected. So it's important that you're able to answer all these questions before you click on submit. Now, when you submitted your paper, there are about 4 things that can happen. Your papers can be accepted without changes, although this is rare. Yeah, I've been publishing it for quite a while now, and I have over 80 publications, and it's only happened to me once. It's only one time I've submitted a paper and then it was accepted without any corrections or changes. But yeah. Also, there is also accept with minor changes, no substantive changes. This is also common, not as rare as the previous ones. And then we have major changes, and I believe the next speaker will be speaking on how you address all the comments that come from the editor. So usually that's what happens. And then there's also the red one, the red light, rejection, not suitable for the journal, even if given a chance of revision. And let me say that the time to this first decision can take up to 2 to 3 months. And in some journals, you might get rejection the following day, simply because the article is not suitable for their journals. But if you are, very lucky, your work can then go to for peer review, and then you can get feedback. And the good thing is, even if your paper is rejected and is being peer reviewed, you will have comments that can help you strengthen your work and then find another journal. Those comments are really, really important in improving your work. So it's important that your work goes for peer review. But if it doesn't, you might it might be that you did not select the appropriate journals. So one thing that has worked for me in the past is I always assess the kind of articles they publish and compare it to the data I have. So sometimes I say, these people don't publish work from, say, a small segment of Africa. Maybe you need to publish a multi-country study, or you need to have the data for multi-country study before they can consider your work. So you don't even bother submit to them. But there are also journals that are much more friendly. So getting rejection within a day or 2 might just mean that your work is not suitable for the journal. Now, after receiving the decision, it's important that you inform your co-authors of the outcome if they are not copied in the email by the editor. And then, of course, when your paper has been accepted, congratulations. You get an email congratulating you that your paper has been accepted. So now we have a last opportunity to dot the I's and cross the T's. This time, you are only allowed to make minimal changes. This time is the time to check if the names are spelled correctly, and then if your affiliations are well presented in the paper, because some journals might give you a hard time in correcting names after it's been published. So this is the time you need to pay close attention to the proof that will be shared with you. And then you send the proof, and then the paper gets published. Now, there are a few reasons for rejection. And if you master some of these, you'll be able to increase the acceptance rates. If your sample size is too small or biased, your opportunities of publishing in reputable journals might be quite limited. So even when you are conducting your research, always ask yourself whether the sample size you've chosen is large enough. Also, when there is insufficient description of the problem statement, at the end of the day, research should advance knowledge. So your publication should contribute to knowledge. So always ask yourself that critical questions. What contribution am I making on this particular topic? So, and that makes a problem statement. So you need to have a clear and succinct description of the gap that your study is going to fill. If you don't do that, then you might find it difficult to publish your work. Also minimize exaggeration. Often authors overinterpret their results as well as the implication of their results. So try as much as possible not to be, use too much of hyperbole, and let your findings match your discussion as well as your conclusion. Do not exaggerate. Also, incomplete and inaccurate data or outdated literature. So when you do that literature review, ask yourself whether you are, reviewing recent evidence and you are not writing paper in 2022 and all your references are from 2000, 2003, 2005, or even 1990s. So ask yourself, your literature current and recent. Inappropriate or suboptimal instrumentation is also another pitfall. So again, you want to give an accurate description of your methodology. Are you using the right tools to measure the right indicators, so such that your measures are pretty accurate? Now, if your tests are too difficult to follow or read, then your paper can be rejected. There are a lot of tools now that you can use. There's Grammarly. You can ask your peers or your friends to proofread for you. You can ask your professors to help you read your article. Try as much as possible to make your tests easy to read. Write as though you are writing for a 10-year-old. Write clearly. Also, your figures and tables should not be defective. They need to be clear, it should be readable. I know that often people do tables and figures that are not clear. That's also another pitfall. Now, inappropriate or incomplete statistics. Inappropriate in the sense that are you, analyzing your data with the right statistical modeling? I know that often you might not have access to a statistician, but if you can, it's important that you check with a statistician to see if you've used the appropriate statistical techniques in addressing your research question. And then lastly, inaccurate or inconsistent data reported. I think one thing that is quite difficult for people to follow is when your sample size keep changing. You say you studied 500 people, but you are presenting results for say 300. Here you presented for 200. Here you presented for maybe 450. Such inconsistency makes it very difficult to follow your data. So it's important that your denominators are aligned with your sample. And then if there is any reason where your sample size is not up to what you projected, you provide justification. Thank you very much for listening, and good luck in submitting your articles, in finding the journals, and in getting all the acceptance and publication of your work.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Jai, for the informative presentation. Allow me to keep my video off for the rest of the session, suffering some power outages where I am right now. So I'll now introduce our next speaker, Dr. Tiang. He's a physician and epidemiologist based at the Cambridge Wellcome Trust Research Program. He obtained his undergraduate and postgraduate medical degrees at the University of Nairobi, followed by an MSc and PhD in epidemiology at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. He has a broad research portfolio, having led and published numerous studies on a variety of locally relevant topics, and has also obtained several internationally competitive research grants from funders, including the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Department of International Development, Wellcome Trust, and National Institute for Health Research. Karibu, Dr. Etienne.
Thank you very much, Dr. Leach and KMA for giving me this opportunity. I hope that everyone can hear me clearly.
Yes, you're clear.
Yes, you're clear.
I think his screen froze.
My namesake, Dr. Anthony Ajayi, who's given me. Okay. Can you see?
Dr. Yeah, you're breaking off a little bit.
All right. Looks like
Yeah.
there might be problems with the internet connection. Let me switch off my video. Maybe that will help. Okay. Okay, let me also close something else. All right. Yeah. So I think the introduction that Dr. Ajayi has given, the presentation is given, will serve as a very good background to what I'm going to present. Inevitably, there'll be some overlap with what he has said, but that's not a problem because actually it will help emphasize some of the points that have been made. So I'll start with an overview of the manuscript submission process. So Dr. Ajayi has talked you through the process that goes into preparing the manuscript. You then submit the manuscript to the journal, and the editor makes a decision at that point on whether to send it for peer review or reject it. And this will be on the basis of a couple of factors. The main one being whether the findings in the manuscript are relevant to the audience and the mission of the journal. And so actually most manuscripts tend to be rejected at that point because they are often inappropriate for the journal, or sometimes the quality of the manuscript is just too poor for the journal in question. So after if they then make a decision to send the manuscript out for review, and this can take a couple of days to a couple of weeks, the editor will then send it out to reviewers, typically minimum, but usually it's at least more than two reviewers that will take a look at the manuscript. And there are various factors that they'll look at when assessing the manuscript. They look at the significance of the findings presented, the focus and the key concepts that are there in the manuscript, the literature that has been reviewed, the methods, whether they've been explained well, and the quality of the analysis and the reporting, and very importantly, also the structure and cohesion of the argument. So having reviewed the manuscript, these peer reviewers will then send their comments to the editor, who look at those decisions. And you saw all the possible decisions that are there with a manuscript. So rarely the manuscript will be accepted as is, but frequently you'll be requested to revise the manuscript on the basis of the comments from the peer review. The editor will again review and see if you've comprehensively covered the suggestions and comments for improvement, and then make a decision to either accept the manuscript or reject it. So I want to go to the what, the who, the why, and the how of peer review. What is peer review? So peer review is basically the evaluation of academic research in field. And it serves as a quality control procedure. Conducts the peer review. As mentioned in the first bullet, it's usually by experts, other experts in the same field, and who are independent of the authors. So this can't be people with whom you've collaborated previously, because they need to be able to give an independent opinion of the quality of the manuscript. How are these people, the peer reviewers, selected? There's no hard and fast rule in selecting the peer reviewers, but in general, the editors will base their selection on the personal contacts of peer reviewers. So they'll consult the database. They'll look also at the availability of this peer reviewers. So some peer reviewers are notorious. Maybe they've put an out of office email reply. So it can take a while to find authors of the references that you cite in your manuscript, because obviously you'll be would be suitable reviewers. Also, many journals recommend that when you're writing the cover letter, when submitting your manuscript, that you give suggestions of potential reviewers, and often they'll ask you to give at least 3 suggested reviewers. You're supposed to suggest independent reviewers, not just those whom you think are your friends and are likely to give you a favorable opinion. And in most journals, if you suggest 3 potential reviewers, the editors will try and pick 1 out of those 3, and they won't necessarily tell you whom they've picked. So why do we do part of the scientific process? It acts as a filter so as to ensure that the research that is published is properly verified, and it brings unwarranted claims, unacceptable interpretations, and personal views. So on the right, I'm just showing you a newspaper article of a classical failure of peer review, and this was from a predatory journal, which Dr. Ajay has mentioned in his presentation. So the journals that are just exist to make money, having any quality control. So this was a computer scientist, I think in Australia, and he got fed up by a predatory journal that kept emailing him, asking him, requesting him to submit an article. So he made up an article consisting of just 7 words, and excuse the profanity, and he sent it to the journal. And surprisingly, within a day, this bogus article that contains just 7 words that have been repeated so many times was accepted by the journal and published. So obviously there was no peer review here, and you can see from the quality of the paper that the importance of peer review. So that was an extreme example. Do you handle peer review comments? A lot of what I'm going to say is from a really nice article that was published by Journal of Epidemiology. This is one of the oldest journals in the world, started, I think, sometime in the 1800s, a very prestigious journal in the field of epidemiology. And being an editor, he was able to, and he was retiring. So it was like an exit interview. He could say anything without any reservations. And so he gave advice. The title of the paper is Dear Author. And he gives some really nice advice on what you need to do to make sure your manuscript has the best chance of being accepted. And that starts from the process of preparing the manuscript, and also in in dealing with handling the peer reviewer comments. And he gives this from the perspective of the editor. So remember, there are many parties in this interaction. There's you, the author, there's the journal editors, there's the peer reviewers, then there's the audience, the people that read the journal. So all these people have different interests, and it is important that you understand this interest, because they'll influence the way manuscript preparation and peer review. Your best chance at getting, if I could call them kind comments from reviewers, is to make sure that you submit at the first submission the best possible version of your manuscript. So please ensure that you've checked it, you've reviewed it compulsively before sending it to the journal. Make sure it fits the journal's specifications. Make sure there are no embarrassing problems. So you've referred to a table or a figure in the text, and yet that figure is not there. And we're all busy people, so an article will be like 3,000 words with 6 tables and figures revision. So it's quite easy to miss out on some things. And from personal experience, it also happens to me. Often it's after you hit the submit version that you realize, oh no, there was a small error, something that I forgot. So do your best to try and make sure that you're sending the best possible version. And sometimes what I do to avoid these embarrassing problems is when I'm ready to submit, I say, okay, hold off for one more day, sleep over it, and then the next day, check it again, and then submit. Then run a spell checking program, so Grammarly and other examples. It takes just a short time, but it saves you a lot of problems. Even though peer review is supposed to be objective, there's some things which can just put off a peer reviewer. So if they see some evidence of sloppiness, like basic typographical mistakes, then that can just upset the reviewer and bias them. In a manuscript, in many other respects, is a very meritorious manuscript. Then write an informative and nice cover letter, but don't be grandiose in it. So study demonstrating this and that. But in truth, actually, very few things nowadays are truly novel. There'll be things, what might be new might be the location of the study or a particular method that was used, but it's rarely totally groundbreaking. So don't be too grandiose in the cover letter. So those are the do's. Then the don'ts for the manuscript. Please don't write too lengthy an introduction that almost looks like a thesis or article and about a manuscript presents. To generally just give a short background and a statement of the problem that that you're trying to address in your current manuscript. Then in the manuscript, avoid too much repetition, especially in the results, in the text of the results. So if you've got tables and figures, you can briefly mention them in the text, but don't repeat everything that is on the tables in those texts. And then the tables shouldn't be too big, occupying too much space. Then don't just provide results how do I put it, without any basic description of the data. So you can, for example, say that this model showed a very high risk of factor X in causing blah, 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 without even describing the population that was studied and giving, for example, what proportion were males, what the average age was, how many total observations were there, and you immediately jump to the logistic regression results or the Cox regression. So avoid that admission so that the peer reviewers and look kindly on what you've submitted. Then also don't repeat findings in the discussion. In the discussion, what you're supposed to do is just to integrate the new findings, point out the implications of these findings in the light of other studies, and also address limitations. Now, when the peer review comments come back to you, there'll be two parts to it. It will start with a letter from the editor, and often the letter will go along the lines that, thank you for having submitted this manuscript. We sent it out for peer review, and after the comments, based on the comments of the peer reviewers, we've made a decision that you should revise the manuscript and resubmit. That's the most frequent words that you'll find. Rarely will you get a rejection after peer review, but that does happen more. This presentation is about what to do when you've been asked to revise. So there'll be that part of the letter from the editor, and then there'll be below it, there'll be the reviewer's comments. So step one, read the reviewer's comments very carefully, as well as the editor's letter. And typically what I do is I first quickly scan the letter to be sure that they haven't rejected the manuscript, then skim through the comments that they've made, and then put it aside. Come back to it after about a day or two, and read those comments again while formulating potential response without writing them down. So peer reviewers are very diverse, just like they are humans, and we all see things differently. So part of the work of the editor is to remove inciting comments that a good peer reviewer shouldn't include in the peer review. So for example, a peer reviewer can say that this is more poorly analyzed data from a third-rate group, or a truly egregious exercise in data dredging. So that's not conduct review, and it's the job of the editor to remove such comments. But from time to time, they'll still come through. So be prepared to see those kind of comments. There's a rule in peer review that do unto others as you'd like done unto you. So at one point, I know we're talking at people, I'm discussing mainly with people who will be recipients of peer review comments, but you would also be at some point be asked to review manuscripts. So please do unto others as you'd like done unto you, and don't use such comments. As you review those comments, put your emotions aside, if possible. I know the manuscript is very dear to you. This is work that you've probably been thinking, sleeping, and eating about for very many years before putting it out and submitting it to the journal. And then you get peer review comments that often indicate a poor understanding of the work. So that can really upset you, but just put your emotions aside. A good editor will give a letter that will give you a good guide in interpreting the comments. And sometimes some of the comments from the peer reviewers can be conflicting, and the editor sometimes will help resolve some of those conflicting suggestions. So just a few translations of some of the words that the editors and reviewers would put. So for example, you can get a comment that this manuscript is in need. That's just a polite way of saying that the manuscript is badly written, but the editor is giving you an opportunity to rewrite it in more that opportunity, otherwise you get a rejection. And you can get a comment that the discussion fails to address limitations. I think that's pretty obvious. Doesn't require any translation. You can also get comments that you failed to cite relevant studies by others. Even though I've said that translation is not needed for that, it sometimes that's an indirect way of the peer reviewers being upset that you didn't cite their own papers. Usually they're supposed to be independent and they're not supposed to suggest which papers you should cite, but have that at the back of your mind if you see such a comment. So when you're then invited by the editor to provide a rebuttal, and that rebuttal will be composed of the letter as well as the revised manuscript. So remember, this is not, it's not a fight, and sometimes I don't particularly like the word rebuttal because I think it sounds rather acrimonious, suggests that you're battling, but you're not. This is supposed to be an academic, a polite academic exchange. So begin by politely acknowledging the reviewers. Say, thank you for your very helpful and thoughtful comments. Remember, peer review is people are not paid for volunteer their time and expertise to review your work for no pay. So at least acknowledge them for that. Then you need to give a point-by-point response to all the editor. So please don't ignore anything. And often what I do is I'll quote verbatim what the reviewer said, and immediately after that verbatim quotation, I put my response there. And this response should offer a description of the changes made or an explanation as to why that suggestion was set aside. You have to be careful about the type of response that you give. So don't brush. If you get a comment that uncontrolled confounding may explain the association, don't give a response simply saying we disagree. There you're inviting an argument, and that argument will simply lead to a rejection. A good response to such a comment would be that the association persisted with inclusion of other potential confounding factors in the model. The additional models are included in table 2. And better still, this is in the letter. You can put an excerpt of table 2 in this rebuttal letter. Of course, it will also be in the revised manuscript. So that's an example of how to respond to a comment. Then you'll also be invited to send a version of the manuscript of mine that was published last year. So I'm just showing you the tracked changes. So you can either have it in tracked changes like I'm showing you on this slide, or you can simply highlight the text where revisions have been made. If you choose the latter, so Microsoft Word, if you put in track changes will track every single space or full stop or comma that you've changed. That's not absolutely necessary. So you can accept some of those changes so that you are left with only the major things that you want this and editors to focus on. So you don't want too much clutter in the tracked document. So having completed peer review outcomes, goes by to reject the manuscript at that point. Maybe you did not satisfactorily address the comments from the peer reviewers and the editors, and they also say that even if you do further changes, the manuscript acceptable. They can, alternatively, they can give you a second chance to revise again and reset, or they can accept it with some additional minor revisions to be made, or they would say that they're completely happy with the revisions that you've made and that you do not need to make the publication process, and it will take some time before it is eventually published. So I've talked about peer review in the traditional sense, that is occurs in the pre-publication period. But even after the manuscript has been published, there is what is known as post-publication peer review. So the manuscript is out in the public domain, but people can still review and make comments because, as I'll point out, peer review is not perfect. So there are various forums where post-publication peer review occurs. Posted there an example of an article that was published in 2020 in the middle of the COVID pandemic, and I was actually an author of this letter where we had serious concerns about that paper, the New England Journal of Medicine, both of which actually ended up being retracted because there was actually fabricated data. Then PubPeer is another site where papers review equivalent of PubMed. Then Twitter, I actually find Twitter also to be a very nice forum, and there are very many journal clubs or top scientists who will review papers on Twitter, and you'll actually find them pointing out serious defects or serious trends of various papers that have been published. Trying to clear a few misconceptions about peer review. And there have even been formal studies done about this. And it's been shown that selection of reviewers is often biased. So, for example, many papers from low and middle income countries like ours will tend to be reviewed by people from high income countries who do not fully understand our context. Then there are also gender and racial biases in the selection of peer reviewers. Then the fact that a paper is peer reviewed doesn't mean it's necessarily the truth. I've had this in many conversations, people just talking in the general public that the proof that something is true, and they show you, yeah, according to this peer-reviewed article, this is what was found. The fact that it was peer-reviewed doesn't give it the imprint of infallibility. Then important to know that peer reviewers influence but do not ultimately decide the fate of a manuscript. The ultimate decision is made by the editors. So you can get glowing peer reviews, but the editors still detect significant problems or for some reason decide that the manuscript is not worthy of publication, or alternatively, you can get really bad peer reviews and the editors can sense that there's obvious bias and they use or send it to another set of peer reviewers, and then they ultimately make the decision based on their own reading of the manuscript as well as the comments that they get from peer reviewers. So in conclusion, peer review is an essential component in the scientific process. It's not entirely predictable. It's not for the editors, for the reviewers. It's what makes the exchanges that happen in the process of peer review. And I'll hand it back to Dr. Leach.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Tiang, for the insightful presentation. We are now going to have a discussion, Q&A session with our two presenters, and I'll be handing over the meeting to the moderator, Professor Nchafato, the chairman of the KMA Research Committee for this session. Over to you, Prof.
Thanks very much, June, for that, and really so much thanks to Dr. Zajai and Dr. Tiang for having taken us through the topics on peer review. We'll now quickly get into the question and answer session, and I'll try and group them so that we can take maybe a few at a time and try and save on time. The first one, I'd probably try and bring in the EAMJ editor who I see is in the room, Dr. Yonga. Someone is asking about are there any limitations with regards to topics published in EAMJ, and also wants to know the process of paying for papers. Dr. Yonga, do you want to just make a quick comment? This is very specific to EAMJ, and Prof. Okeo, you're also welcome to who chairs the EAMJ board, you're also welcome to make a comment on this. Dr. Yonga, let's go ahead.
Thanks, Nchafatso, for the introduction, and a very big thank you to the speakers for their wonderful presentations. I'm going to tackle this question in two parts. I'll tackle the first part on the scope of topics that we published in the EAMJ. Then I'll bring in Mariam, who I can say is the engine behind the editorial work that goes on at the journal desk. So with regard to the scope of topics that we publish, I think EAMJ, is one of the few journals that publishes a very broad scope. We publish across a wide realm of topics, from medicine to dentistry, to public health, to pharmacy, and most recently, we've also been doing a lot of work in publishing veterinary medicine or animal health aspects. And we've been very fortunate to have peer reviewers across these topics. There may not be as many, especially within the realm of animal health, but I think over the last month or so, we've been able to get quite a good chunk of reviewers for the animal health aspect, because as you know, learning from COVID-19 and very many other emerging and re-emerging infectious diseases, animal health plays a very key role in understanding how some of these pathogens migrate. And so we also now publish quite a bit of work around that aspect. With regard to fees, I'll probably let Mariam respond to that. Mariam, please.
Mariam, yeah, go ahead, Mariam.
Sorry, I'm having some issues with my light here on the internet. I didn't get the question right, Dr.
The question is about the publication fees. Someone is asking how much it costs. I've just put a comment in the chat box for the more questions on how to submit. They can be sent via email.
Yes.
I think that would be.
Thank you for that, Doc. And the publication fee is $100 at the moment, and that is after acceptance.
after acceptance. Thank you very much, Mariam.
Yes.
I'm going back to bring back the speakers, and someone wants to know how do you select how you nominate potential reviewers? And this is a question by Rosas, and it's almost similar to what Dr. Nekoe has asked down there. Dr. Ajay.
Okay, what?
Let's go. No, that's for Dr. Ajay and Dr. Tiang. Mariam, thanks.
Okay, if I can go first.
Yeah.
All right.
Go ahead, Tony.
This is a chance, Tony. Yeah. So there's no hard and fast rule of how you'd nominate these potential reviewers, but generally you want people. It will be people whose work you've read and you have high regard for. Of course, to maximize your chances of getting a good review, you hope that they're also objective in their peer review. So you can never know that until after, but in general, it will be people whose work you think high of.
Good, thanks, Tony. Dr. Jai, do you have anything?
You wouldn't, for example, in general, you wouldn't want to nominate.
Tony, you're breaking up a bit. Yeah. Okay. Now meet. Yeah. Dr. Jai, anything to add on that?
Yeah. Let me say because there is further clarification to that comment. Let me say that. Once you publish your first papers, for your first paper, there will be lots of journals contacting you, and majority of them are fake journals, and they are the predatory journals. So those ones might even ask you to review articles outside your field. But for journals that are not predatory journals, for the ones that are of good, high quality journals, they have criteria for selecting the reviewers. Some we want you to have published on that topic in particular before they ask you to review it. So it's not only in your discipline, but they want you to also have content knowledge of the article you are reviewing. Others also want you to have published 10 papers in the last 5 years. You know, the criteria vary, just as Dr. Etienne said, in deciding who is a peer reviewer for papers. And then, in fact, some journals like say Lancet, for example, or New England Journal of Medicine, they even have they have statisticians that do in-house statistical review for papers as well, just to be sure that the reviewer is competent in revising the analysis done and some of the statistics in the paper. So, but the level of details and thoroughness depends on the journal itself. And yeah, don't be surprised if you receive articles outside your discipline, say from engineering, and you're wondering how am I selected for this particular paper? Yeah, possibly a fake journal.
Okay, good. And while you're at it, Dr. Jai, someone also wants to know, I think you touched on this, what's an acceptable range in terms of for a literature review? How old should the data be? And someone is asking, is 5 years acceptable? I don't think there's any hard and fast rules, but I'll let you tackle that. Go ahead with that before I bring back Dr. Tiang.
Yeah, so I mean, you know, just as Doctor said, there's no hard and fast rule per se. There's no rule that says you can't put anything beyond 5 years. But let's note that there are estimates from, say, WHO or from, say, Guttmacher Institute on abortion, or from UNAIDS on HIV indicators. These estimates are done yearly, so you don't want to be citing a 5-year-old estimate when there is a 2022 estimate. So if you are citing statistics, you want to be sure to be citing the most recent one. But if you are citing, if you are citing a theory that was developed in the 1970s, for example, you still have to cite the 1970 either way, or even 1980, because it's a groundbreaking work in your field. So again, if you are citing statistics, let the data be accurate and reflective of the current moment as much as possible. Thank you.
Good, thanks. I'll just bring in Dr. Tony. I see there are two hands. I'm going to allow the two hands to speak, but just before they go ahead, Tony, someone was asking, some journals receive lots of submissions and you end up getting rejection submission within hours. Well, I think to me this is a good thing because it allows you to move on to the next journal. I don't know if you have a comment on that.
Yes, I agree. The quicker the rejection, the better. Yes, the manuscript, the journals, I think Nature, often within 2 hours, you'll get your rejection and you move on to the next.
Yeah, good. I'm going to allow, there's two hands, Dr. Hilary Ball, I'm going to allow you to talk and ask your question. Hilary is getting ready. There's another question by Zadok. I'm going to allow you, Zadok, to talk. Just unmute yourself and ask your question. Hilary first. No. Dr. Zadok, unmute and ask your question. No. Oh, I see. Oh, there are other questions coming in the chat box. Sorry, I was just monitoring the Q&A box. Someone is asking, are there plans to send EAMJ countrywide? How often is the EAMJ published? Hilary, go ahead with your question. I'm going to bring back Prof. Okeo and Dr. Yonga to tackle those questions on EAMJ. Hilary, go ahead. Are you speaking? We can't hear you. Okay, I can't hear Hilary. So Dr. Yonga, do you want to just come back and Prof. Okeo, make a comment on EAMJ? How often is it published? How long does it take from acceptance to publication?
Yeah, thanks. So I'll quickly tackle the second bit, and I'll probably let Prof. Okeo also weigh in on a few issues regard to that question. With regard from acceptance to publication, of late now we've tried to be as up to date as possible. So normally, if we are late, it's normally on the second or third issue. So supposing we accept your paper, say for example today, which is towards the end of September, and then the next issue, so 2 issues from today, that will be November. So that should probably be the latest at which your paper should be appearing or should be published, so to speak, after it has been accepted. So maybe, Prof, you could weigh in on the issue of print, but I know because of the climate change issues, because the East African Medical Journal has also been a very key player on the issues of climate change. And as part of the charter that we are signing with other medical journals, we are trying to really minimize the print issue so that we stop this issue of cutting trees and all that. So a lot of work that will be published will mostly be online, but maybe Prof, you can weigh in on that issue.
Thank you, Dr. Yonga. I wanted to, and good evening, everyone. Thank you, our presenters, for your magnanimity in joining us in this discussion. I think if Mariam is still on, I would like questions. Mariam, are you able to do that?
Prof, you dropped out a bit, but yes, for sure, we can bring in Mariam. I think there's a question there, is EAMJ indexed? I think this was tackled by Prof. Atoli last time. He said EAMJ is not indexed yet. It used to be, but in the process of trying to get that back on track. Mariam, does EAMJ publish ahead of print?
Thank you, Doctor. Currently, we are not printing, we are just doing online publications.
Okay, good. I'll just take the discussion back to the presenters. Someone wants to hear more about open and blinded peer review process.
It's okay, Chair. I can respond now to this 1 or 2
Yeah.
One or two remaining.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Prof. Go ahead, Prof. Yeah.
Yes. Once upon a time, we used to be all print. As those who have been in the field long enough will remember. And there was a reason why we went off print. And so as we speak now, we're not printing hard copies, but if the view of readers should come to us that this is a popular intervention, the board will certainly make a decision to make physical prints. In terms of, and I'll use this opportunity to also talk about some of the things that had been mentioned earlier, including on the scope. In a way, we have been kind of lenient. In other words, expanding our scope a little bit. And there is a good reason for that. Even the fact that we are able to integrate veterinary medicine, you will remember that we are in the era of One Health. And One Health brings a convergence between veterinary medicine and human medicine. So there is a reason for that. Turnaround time, we've been working on it over time, and I think we are improving. The editor-in-chief can confirm that indeed, if we look at the statistics, we're improving in terms of turnaround time. Indexing, yes, East African Medical Journal went through a hard time. And because of that hard time, we were not able to meet certain specifications required by agencies that do indexing. But in over time, we are working on that. We are steadily improving. And I think in a short while, we should be making that application for indexing, having ticked off the things that we need to demonstrate to the agencies that, yes, we have accomplished A, B, C, and D, and therefore we are eligible for indexing. And Dr. Nchafaso, if you allow me, I will ask a question.
Please. Yeah, sure, please, go ahead.
This is specifically to Ajay. The politics of some of these decisions. For example, irrespective of impact factor, if there is a journal in a tropical country that is writing and communicating messages on tropical diseases, and there is another journal that is highly indexed in the temperate climate and is also talking about tropical diseases, wouldn't one say that a good political decision would be to, irrespective of impact factor, to put support and focus on that journal that operating in the environment of tropical diseases? That is just an example. It can work in questions for other disease conditions as well. So is there a place for politics in the decision makings other than those technical aspects? Thank you.
Dr. Ajay, Dr. Etiang, if you have a comment in response to that. I could probably just say, Prof, I think the landscape of medical publishing has been changing quite a bit. Well, impact factor has just been a number. A lot of focus, in the what Dr. Ajay mentioned, decolonizing global health, for example. Some focus is also shifting towards, publishing within, context relevant, where the impact is not just an impact factor number, but impact in terms of the number of people affected and so forth and so on. So, Dr. Ajay, Dr. Etiang, any comments in response to that? And while doing so, you could also make a comment on the open and blind peer review process.
No, I agree. I for one, I just believe that the impact factor of a journal does not necessarily rub off on the impact of your work. So the important thing is to, ensure that your work has meaningful contributions, and it's also important that we promote our journals here on the continent, because as Prof has said, the people that will probably read your work are the people that will make use of your findings as well, unlike just putting it elsewhere that is not often accessible, maybe in a paywall journal from the US and all that. So yeah, for me, I always caution people about just using impact factor as the sole metric for deciding a place to publish paper. Look at the people behind the journal, look at their institutions, their reputation, are they reputable people? Look at the editors in charge of the journals, what they've done, their institutions. And then that can be a good marker for say, oh, this is a good journal. I mean, if my professors are publishing there, if these are professors from this university, prestigious university, say University of Nairobi and all that, that could be a good indicator. The question on open versus blind review, I know some journals, especially in social sciences, they do blind review, meaning you remove all identifying information from your paper, your affiliation, you just submit the manuscript. Even the ethics section can give an indication of your school. So you blot out the name of institutions that granted your ethics approval. And the reason for doing that is people want the process to be as fair as possible. But there have been a number of experiments regarding whether blind peer review is more effective relative to open peer review. I think the jury is still out. I'm not sure there is a conclusive evidence that that's a better way. And there is advantage and also disadvantage on both sides. If it's open peer review, maybe people can also be much more cordial in the way they comment. So some people can be really, really rude if they have the opportunity to peer review your work. But if they are going to make their names open, maybe they will probably be more cautious in their language. But if it's a blind peer review, you don't know who reviewed your work. They also don't know you. They can really, really be mean as well. So those are some of the challenges, when you begin to consider the debates around open versus blind peer review.
Good. Any parting shot, Tony? I just over time want to bring this to a close.
Okay. Yeah. I fully agree with Dr. Jai's comments. I'll just add one more problem with open test is relatively early in their career. They would be a bit reluctant to reveal themselves when they peer review articles from more senior people for the fear of sanctions. Even if they try to be as objective as possible, when you're reviewing your senior professor and you write your name there, you fear that you might get adverse consequences later. So that has been a problem. I tend to see that the people who have no problem at all having their names listed and openly named as peer reviewers are those who are already very senior in their career, and there's really not much that somebody can do to harm them. So there are pros and cons of open peer review, and those are just some of them. It's a big debate in the academic circles right now.
Yeah, sure. Good. Well, thanks to both speakers. We'll bring the session on discussion to an end. Just before I hand the meeting back to Dr. Leach, I just wanted to make an announcement. I hope my screen is sharing. There's a training course that is currently being run, by the Center for Bioethics and Culture. That's in Pakistan, and the Kenya Medical Research Institute. That's our Kemley Bioethics training initiative. It's a certificate course, and they're calling for applications. The deadline for submission of applications is, I think, the 12th of October. Yes, there's a 12th of October down there. This poster has been posted, I think, on the KMA website, and Peter has just given me a link that I put in the chat box. If you're interested in attending this 3-day course, the more details or more information can be found on that link. Someone has asked, can we access presentations from the speakers? Yes, these are being recorded, and again, with the permission of the speakers, we'll be sharing the presentations or redacted portions of them with their permission. I now want to hand the meeting back to Dr. Leach. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof, for moderating the Q&A session. So now, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, we are now almost coming to the end. But before we close, I'll invite our Secretary General, Dr. Diana Marion, to give a vote of thanks to our speakers, panelists, and all participants to officially close the webinar. To you, Dr. Marion. Dr. Marion.
Is Dr. Marion, Dr. Kigondu, and do you want to speak on behalf of, or Dr. Otara is online? Dr. Otara, can we bring you in?
Hello, good evening, and thanks so much, the presenters, Anthony and Anthony, for very enlightening topic that you've covered very well and ably on peer review. It's been a pleasure, and I think we've really learned a lot from you. I appreciate the hosts, the KMA, and all that have participated, and we encourage us to tell more friends, more of our colleagues to attend to attend the subsequent meetings that we shall be having. We have them monthly, and I really want to encourage those who are in publications, who are publishers, who are authors, to consider EAMJ as a first line journal for publications. With that, thank you so much and have a good evening.
Thank you, everyone. Our next webinar will be next month. Good evening and goodbye.
Good. Thanks, everyone. Bye.